There is a particular kind of honesty that only one specific environment produces, not the honesty of the therapy session, where the goal is understanding and the listener is trained to receive, not the honesty of the financial counseling appointment, where the numbers are examined and the strategies are discussed, not even the honesty of the deathbed conversation, which I have described in an earlier teaching on this channel, where the finality of the situation strips away the remaining defenses. The specific honesty I'm describing is the honesty of the confessional, the small, quiet space where a person kneels before God in the presence of a priest and says, without preparation, without the protection of a persona, without the social negotiation of how the story will be received, what is actually true, what they actually did, what they actually failed to do, what they have been carrying. In 20 years of hearing confession, I have listened to financial honesty that no boardroom, no financial advisor, no marriage counselor, and no therapist has ever heard, because those environments, however skilled and however caring, still contain the social dimension. The confessional does not. The person kneeling there is not performing for an audience. They are speaking to God, and the specific financial confession that I hear more consistently than any other, the regret that comes up with a frequency that has made me certain it is not individual but structural, not personal but endemic, is not what I expected when I began my ministry. It is not a dramatic failure. It is not a catastrophic loss. It is not even a specific moral wrong done to another person. It is something quieter and more costly than any of those things. And today I want to tell you what it is, because the person kneeling in that confessional, in their 50s or 60s or 70s, is often the person watching this channel in their 30s or 40s. And what they would give to have heard this 20 years earlier is precisely what I want to give you now. Welcome. I am the Millionaire Priest, and today I am giving you what the confessional gave me. Before I name the regret, I want to establish why the confessional produces this specific quality of financial honesty that other environments do not, because the mechanism matters. The confessional is theologically designed to produce truth, not the managed truth of the careful self-presentation, the actual truth. The person who enters it has already made the internal decision to be honest, has already crossed the threshold of the rationalizations and the justifications and the reasonable-sounding explanations, and has arrived at the simple account of what happened and what did not. And the financial confessions that emerged. The wealthiest man in the ancient world, he did not pray for money. He asked for one thing, and wealth followed as the consequence. I am the Millionaire Priest, and I have spent 20 years documenting what Solomon knew. 2 books, the Confession Code, the 7 financial sins no priest will name from the pulpit, and the priest's ledger, the 40-year method for reading wealth before it arrives. One for where you are, one for where you are going. Both available now through the link in the description and the pinned comment below. From that space, have a quality of clarity and a freedom from self-deception that I have never encountered in any other environment. The person in the confessional is not telling me what went wrong. They are telling me what was wrong, the underlying orientation, the foundational pattern, the structural condition that produced the specific outcomes they are confessing. And the most common financial confession I hear is not an event. It is a pattern, not a thing that happened once, a thing that kept not happening, across years, across decades, until the cost of its not happening became visible in a way that cannot be unseen. Before I name the regret, I want to pause here because what I'm about to describe is precisely what I have documented in the Confession Code, the 7 financial sins no priest will name from the pulpit. That book was built from the confessional, from 2 decades of financial honesty in that specific environment. Each of the 7 sins I document is a pattern I heard not once or twice, but consistently enough to understand as structural rather than individual. The regret I am about to name is one of those 7, And the reason it is in the book, rather than in a single video, is that the full treatment of it, the theological root, the mechanism, the resolution, the covenant path forward, requires more space than this video can hold. The confession code is available right now through the link in the description and the pinned comment. I also have a second book, The Priest's Ledger, which I will return to before this teaching ends. And now, the regret. The most common financial confession I hear is this, in some form, with some variation, across people of every age and income level and life circumstance, across cultures and countries and languages. The confession is some version of, I knew what I was supposed to do, and I waited too long to begin. I had the vision. I had the calling. I had the specific, clear, recurring sense of what I was supposed to build, the business, the ministry, the financial foundation for my family, the mission that my resources were supposed to serve. I knew it. I believed in it. I prayed about it. And I waited. I waited for the right moment. I waited for the resources to be sufficient. I waited for the children to be grown. I waited for the market to stabilize. I waited for the relationship to be settled. I waited for the debt to be cleared. I waited for the confidence to arrive. I waited for the better preparation that was always one more year of learning away. And now I am sitting here, and the vision has not been built, and the moment did not come, and the years did not return, and I want to confess that I wasted the time God gave me, because I was waiting for a beginning that never required my waiting in the first place. That is the confession, the deferred beginning. Not the failed attempt, the attempt that was never made. Not the bad investment, the investment that was perpetually deferred for a better moment that the better moment never became. The regret is not what was done, it is what was not done. And it is the most common financial confession I hear by a significant margin. Now I want to tell you what this confession reveals about how most people build wealth, because the frequency of this specific regret is not accidental. It reflects something structural about the relationship between human psychology and financial action, something that the person in the confessional has understood from the painful end of their financial story, and that you can understand from the beginning of yours. The first thing it reveals is that most people build wealth from the wrong side of the threshold. There is a threshold in every significant financial beginning, a moment when the decision must be made to start before the conditions are fully favorable. And most people stand at that threshold for the duration of their financially productive years, waiting for the conditions on the other side to improve enough to justify the crossing. They believe, sincerely and with complete good faith, that they are being prudent, that they are being responsible, that they are accumulating the preparation that will make the beginning more likely to succeed. What they are actually doing is standing on the wrong side of the threshold, because the conditions on the other side of the threshold almost never improve to the point where the crossing feels risk-free. They change, sometimes better, sometimes worse, but they never become the fully favorable conditions that the waiting person is waiting for, because those conditions are not on the other side of the threshold. They are on the other side of the decision to cross it. The preparation that is needed to build the vision is almost always generated by the beginning of the building, not accumulated in advance of it, and the person who waits for the preparation to be complete before they begin is waiting for a completion that the beginning alone can produce. This is not a counsel of recklessness. It is the Bereshit principle applied to the deferred beginning. God built creation with the reshit that was available. He did not wait for better conditions. The bet faced forward. The beginning began. The second thing the confessional regret reveals is that most people cannot distinguish preparation from procrastination while they are in it. This is perhaps the most important observation I can make, because the experience of preparing and the experience of procrastinating feel identical from the inside. Solomon was the wealthiest man in the ancient world. He did not pray for money. He asked for one thing, and wealth followed as the consequence. I am the millionaire priest, and I have spent 20 years documenting what Solomon knew. 2 books, The Confession Code, The 7 Financial Sins No Priest Will Name from the Pulpit, and The Priest's Ledger, the 40-year method for reading wealth before it arrives. One for where you are, one for where you are going. Both available now through the link in the description and the pinned comment below. They are both periods of not yet beginning. They are both accompanied by ongoing thought about the future beginning. They are both characterized by the accumulation of knowledge, the development of plans, the refinement of the vision. The difference is not in the activity, it is in the orientation. Preparation is oriented toward the beginning. It has a specific endpoint, a defined threshold, a moment when enough has been accumulated to justify the start. Procrastination is oriented away from the beginning. It has no specific endpoint. Its threshold keeps moving. The moment of enough never arrives because the real function of the preparation is not to produce readiness, but to defer the decision. And from the inside, in the moment, the two feel the same. The person in the confessional could not tell, at the time, that they were procrastinating. They experienced it as prudent preparation. The decades passed, and the clarity arrived too late to change the outcome. The third thing the confession reveals is that most people have set the wrong prerequisite for beginning. The most common wrong prerequisite is the resources. I will begin when I have the capital, when the income reaches a certain level, when the savings account reaches a certain threshold, when the financial situation is stable enough that the risk of the new beginning will not threaten the existing stability. And this prerequisite sounds entirely reasonable, so reasonable that it is almost impossible to argue against it in the moment. Of course, you should have resources before you begin something that requires them. Of course, financial prudence matters. Of course, risk management is not recklessness. But the confessional testimony of the person who spent 20 years waiting for the resources tells us something important. The resources almost never accumulate to the level of the prerequisite. Not because the person was not earning, not because the income was insufficient, but because the resources needed for a significant beginning always feel insufficient relative to the scale of what is being contemplated. The bigger the vision, the larger the gap between the available resources and the resources that feel required. And the person who waits for the gap to close on its own, who waits for the resources to become sufficient before the beginning generates the resources that sufficiency requires, is waiting for the jar of oil to fill itself before they gather the empty vessels. The widow had to gather the jars before the oil flowed. The beginning precedes the provision. The fourth thing the confession reveals is that most people dramatically underestimate the compound cost of delay. We are all familiar with the compound benefit of early beginning, the financial textbook illustration of the person who begins investing at 25 versus the person who begins at 35, and the enormous difference in final outcome despite the relatively small difference in starting point. The mathematics of compounding applied to financial investment is well understood. What is almost never discussed is the compound cost of the deferred beginning applied to the financial calling, to the business not started, the mission not launched, the financial foundation not built. Each year of deferral does not cost 1 year of progress. It costs 1 year of progress plus the compounded return on that year that never had the chance to develop. The person who deferred their beginning by 10 years did not lose 10 years. They lost 10 years plus everything those 10 years would have generated, compounded across the following decades. And the person in the confessional, looking back from the end, is not calculating a 10-year deficit. They are looking at a 60-year financial life and recognizing that the shape of the entire arc was determined by the threshold they never crossed in their 30s or 40s or 50s. The fifth thing, and this is the most specific pastoral observation I can make, is that most people who are in the waiting pattern are not waiting because they lack faith. They are waiting because they lack the specific permission structure that their faith tradition has not given them. The Church, on balance, has done a better job of teaching the theology of suffering than the theology of beginning, better at preparing people to endure the valley than to take the first step into the unknown territory, better at comfort for the person who tried and failed than encouragement for the person who has not yet tried. And the person in the confessional who spent 20 years waiting for a beginning that never came was not lacking faith in God. They were lacking the specific theological permission to begin with what they had before the conditions were favorable, in the faith that the beginning itself would generate what the waiting was attempting to accumulate in advance. This is the theological permission that the biblical narrative gives consistently and that the Church often fails to transmit. Abraham went without knowing the destination. The widow gave the last loaf before she knew there would be more. The disciples cast the net on the other side without knowing if there were fish. The beginning precedes the evidence. And the most common financial confession I hear is the confession of the person who waited for the evidence before they would begin. I want to give you the 5 diagnostic questions that will tell you whether you are in the preparation phase or the deferral pattern right now, because the purpose of this teaching is not to produce guilt in the person who has been waiting. It is to produce clarity, the clarity that the confessional produces, the clarity that, arrived at now, can still change the trajectory. First, can you name the specific threshold you are waiting to cross before you begin? If the answer is yes, if there is a specific, defined condition that when met will trigger the beginning, that is preparation. If the answer is no, if the threshold is vague, shifting, or connected to a general sense of not yet ready, that is the deferral pattern. Second, has the threshold moved in the last 12 months? If the condition that was supposed to trigger the beginning has been redefined rather than met, the movement of the threshold is diagnostic. It is telling you that the threshold is not functioning as a preparation endpoint. It is functioning as a deferral mechanism. Third, what specific action taken this week would constitute the beginning, not the completion, not the full launch, the beginning? One action this week that would cross the threshold in a form small enough to be taken now. If that action cannot be named, the threshold is not a preparation requirement. It is a boundary between where you are and where you are meant to be. Fourth, what is the cost of one more year of waiting? Name it specifically, not in vague terms. In the compound terms we discussed, one more year of deferral plus the compounded return on everything that year would have generated across the remaining decades of your productive financial life. Name that number, write it down. Let it become the cost that the waiting is actually charging. Fifth, if you were in the confessional right now, if you were speaking not to me but to God, without the protection of the reasonable explanations, what would you say about the beginning you have been deferring? That specific, unprotected, confessional quality honesty is the honesty that the financial trajectory requires. I want to come back now to the priest's ledger, the 40-year method for reading wealth before it arrives, because the confessional testimony of the deferred beginning, heard across thousands of people across 20 years, is the foundation of the 40-year framework I have developed in that book. The priest's ledger gives you the ability to read the arc of your financial life before you have lived it, to see from the beginning what the deferred beginning costs across the full 40 years. It is the framework I wish the people in that confessional had had access to when the beginning was still possible. Both books, The Confession Code and The Priest's Ledger, are available through the link in the description and the pinned comment. I want to close with this. The person in the confessional is not a different kind of person from the person watching this video. They are the same person, at a different point in the same story. And the specific thing that separates them, the specific thing that determined whether they would be in the confessional, regretting the deferred beginning, or looking back from the end of the story, grateful that they began, was a single decision at a single threshold in a specific year of their life. Not a grand act of heroic faith, a simple, specific, this-week decision to cross the threshold with the reshit that was available. To begin, before the conditions were favorable, before the resources were sufficient, before the preparation was complete. To begin, with what was in hand, in the direction the vision pointed, in the faith that the beginning would generate what the waiting was attempting to accumulate. That decision, made now, this week, before the threshold moves again, is the decision that will determine which side of the confessional story you are in when the arc is visible in full. Leave a comment below. Tell me what beginning you have been deferring. You do not have to give all the detail. Tell me the category, the business, the ministry, the financial practice, the mission, the calling. Name it in the comment section and let this community bear witness to the beginning of your beginning. I read everyone. If you are new here, welcome to the Millionaire Priest. Subscribe and hit the bell. Every week we go this deep at the place where faith and finances meet. And there is much more coming. Cross the threshold. With what you have, now, before the threshold moves again. And do not spend another year accumulating the regret that the confessional hears most often. The beginning is available today. Begin. Amen.